Happy anniversary, Yes Also Pod. That's right, it's been an entire year of having amazing conversations with some of the world's best comedians and improvisers, and we are so grateful to you for listening. To celebrate and to launch into our second Beats with vigor, we are offering a little promotion for $2 off your first month's subscription when you sign up by April 15th. Just use promo code SECONDBEATS, all one word, at checkout and you're good to go. Thank you so much to everyone for listening and subscribing over the last year. Your backline support has meant the world to us, and we're excited for all of the connections and group games to come. Was that too much? Too many improv? Somebody tag me out. Welcome to Yes Also. I'm Suzi Barrett, and my guest today is indisputable legend Brian Stack. Brian currently writes for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and he wrote for Conan O'Brien for almost 2 decades on all 3 iterations of his late-night show. In the improv world, he was a cast member at Second City in Chicago, a member of Chicago's legendary long-form ensemble, Jazz Freddy, and he currently does Gravid Water in New York. This is one of those special episodes that's not only riddled with comedy tips and insights, but also a ton of great stories. He talks about sharing a dorm floor with Mick Napier, doing bits with Chris Farley, and those of you who are Conan fans will especially get a kick out of Part 2. If you're not already a subscriber, you can get access to Part 2 by going to yesalso.supercast.com and subscribing, and you'll instantly and magically have access to all of our other Part 2s, as well as a billion bonus episodes and a trillion Q&As. Check my math on that. Okay, enough preamble. Let's get to the genius that is Brian Stack. Brian Stack, what a treat to have you here. This is so great.
Suzi, thank you so much for having me. I've listened to so many of your other podcasts and love them, so it's a treat to be on here with you.
Thank you for taking the time. So I obviously want to know how you got started in improv, because you were on Jazz Freddy in like 1992 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You were doing long form at a high level before I even knew that short form existed. So I want to know how you arrived at improv during that time. And then I want to hear how you've seen improv evolve and change over the years.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I became acquainted with improv actually when I was an undergrad in college. Before I had the guts to do it myself. The great Mick Napier, who I know you know,
yeah.
Who turned out to be one of the most pivotal, important people in my life, actually, because by sheer luck, he ended up on my dorm floor in college. He was a year older than me, and he was one of the most original and hilarious people I've ever met in my life, as most people would say of Mick. And at the time, he was just the most fascinating person to me. I'd never met anybody like him. And he...
Can you elaborate on that for a second? Like, what was he like on a dorm floor in college?
He was just... I guess he'd gone through a bit of a transformation during the previous year before I got to school, because he was an Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts and stuff in high school, I think, and had been a veterinary science major or something. But by the time I met him, he was full on Mick, as you know him now. He had a hamster named Jesus H. Christ. I remember that would roll down the hall in a habit trail ball. And he played like Dead Kennedys albums, which I'd never heard. And he also brought us to see Rocky Horror Picture Show, which the only time I ever saw it in a theater, Mick brought us there, and it was his 50th time seeing it. And I remember great. He had a little fedora on. He was just the most original, entertaining, hilarious, smart person I'd ever met up to that point in my life, and still one of the funniest. But he had an improv group at IU, Indiana University, where we went, and that included like Joe Bill and Faith Soloway and a lot of wonderful people. And he used to encourage me to audition, but I didn't have the guts. I was always like so afraid of being bad at it. Even though I knew I'd love it if it worked, I didn't have the guts to do it. And I got so mad at myself for not trying it when I was in school, that when Mick told me about Improv Olympic, I took a class with Sharna the summer after I graduated from IU in summer of '86, and fell totally in love with it, and was so mad at myself for not doing it sooner. But I guess you just have to kind of come out of the egg when you're supposed to come out of the egg. And
that's a great way to say it.
Dave Rosowski said that once, and I stole that from him.
Great. Credit to Dave. Yeah, I love that because, there's no point in retroactively beating yourself up for what it's like. You have no idea what in you needed to develop to get you to the point where it would also be fun for you and not agonizing. And you've mentioned to me that you consider yourself an introvert. Do you think that played into that?
Yeah, I think so. I think as a kid, I just assumed all entertainers were extroverts. And now I know a lot better. I know that so many of my favorite entertainers, including idols of mine like Steve Martin, are very kind of shy, quiet people in real life. I think, but that wouldn't have made any sense to me as a kid. If you told me that like John Lennon got stage fright or something, that wouldn't have made any sense to me. But I know that's true, from hearing it later. Oh, by the way, before I forget, when I was at IU, I did audition for a group that didn't end up performing, but it also included Laura Kraft, who
wow.
At the time, her nickname was Spike. She had very spiky short hair, and and then it was so funny that years later we ended up working at Second City together. But Laura was just a blast. She was a freshman when I was a senior, but we never, unfortunately, never did a show together. But I think my introversion, I needed to overcome that. But once I took that introductory class with Sharna in the summer of '86. I was instantly in love with it, and I wanted to continue doing it. And Sharna put me on a Herald team, but I had committed to going to grad school at University of Wisconsin that fall. And I was like, oh, I've just found this thing I love. And but I guess I'm committed to going to grad school. And by sheer luck in Madison, there was this little theater called the Ark Theater where I did my first performing in front of people, in front of actual audiences. And that was a wonderful experience. It's a laundromat now, unfortunately. But it was a wonderful little theater. And the late, great Chris Farley was actually my first group there.
Wow.
And Todd Hansen, who was later a head writer at The Onion, he was in my group, and some other just wonderful people that went off to do all kinds of things. But it was a great little theater. It was very small. Our audiences were very small. Comedy Sports used to get a lot more people, and I understand why. They had pizza and beer and stuff. But the Ark was a wonderful experience. And
at the Ark, were you doing short form or long form or what?
Yeah, we actually did mostly short form with a few like blackouts and things like that. But I loved it. I loved short form, especially scenic short form, like where you would do scenic based games where it would you'd be doing a scene, but getting input from the audience during the scene. I remember you mentioned a game you did at Boom Chicago with the bell ringing ding, and then you would change what you said.
Oh, sure ding. Yeah. Some people call that new choice. Yeah.
That's a great name. We called it change, and we had the audience, because the audience was so small, it wasn't chaotic enough. They were able to just yell change, and then you would change the last thing you just said, which is basically the same format, that you described.
That would be a nightmare now with large audiences, or with at Boom, it would be a nightmare with the drunk audiences. But yeah, crowdsourcing the calling of a game to an audience is pretty brave by today's standards.
Yeah, I don't think we could have gotten away with it in a larger house, But by the way, my wife Miriam was in the first cast of Boom in the summer of '93. I went over to visit her, and I could tell right away that they had a great thing going. I didn't know it would be going 32 years later, and
Nobody
it's
did.
Wonderful but I knew it was a great idea when I saw it, and I could tell all the audiences. I was like, oh wow, everybody speaks English, and like it was just
right.
It was, I could tell it was already going to be a success.
I'm dying to have Miriam on the pod as well, so put in a good word for me, and
I sure will.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I would love to hear stories from that. So you did the Ark in Madison, and then came back to Chicago.
Yeah, when I finished grad school in '88, I moved back to my hometown of Chicago, and I got to say, I feel really lucky that I was from Chicago, because I don't know if I would have had the guts to move to wherever the improv hub was, and take a big leap of faith like that. I always admired my friends who moved to Chicago to do improv in Second City. And I know you did. You moved to Chicago for that reason, right?
Yeah.
I admire that so much. And if someone, for example, if the improv hub had been Cleveland, I don't know if I would have had the confidence to say to my parents, hey, I'm going to go move to Cleveland to do this comedy thing. But in Chicago, it was sort of like, it was there already. I was there already. And I worked in an ad agency for 4 years as my day job when I finished grad school. And I was doing improv for fun at night at Improv Olympic, taking classes at Second City, going through the level 5, the conservatory program. And then Jazz Freddy grew out of Pete Gardner, who had been in Improv Olympic with us, had also done a really seminal show called Ed, which there was a group called Ed that was directed by Jim Denon. A lot of them came out of Northwestern, and Miriam was in Ed actually in 1990. And Pete pulled like some of his Ed friends together with his IO friends, and that's how Jazz Freddy was formed. And I think that mix of styles and personalities was such a great mix because there was the IO sensibility that was very playful, and most of us like drank too much and stuff. But then there was the Ed people who had been very disciplined and had done like rehearsals every night, and they made us a lot more disciplined, and we made them maybe a little more playful. And the mix was really a fun mix of people.
Those cross-pollinations and blends I think are so good, both for creating the tone of a show, but also for people's style of play. Like any blend like that, like if you can mix discipline with playfulness, if you can mix a slower Chicago style with a faster, more taggy LA style, just anytime you can meet in the middle, I think it creates really great theater. When you say that Ed was doing their own show, what theater were they at?
The first Ed show was actually done at what later became the Wrigley side, which is where IO was. But the stage was built partly with lumber from Miriam's father's construction company.
Wow.
They built the stage there.
Sick name drop, dude.
Yeah, they did. The first run of Ed was, I think, in 1990. And then they later did a run at the Remains Theater, which was a wonderful theater I think it was near the Clybourne Corridor there. Really cool theater with, and I think that I had never done improv in an actual theater until we did Jazz Freddy. And I think Pete recognized when they did that show at the Remains that a theater environment was really conducive to trying new stuff and branching out a little bit and pushing yourself. And so when we did Jazz Freddy, it was at a little theater called the Live Bait Theater, which was on Clark.
I remember the Live Bait. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, it was a lovely. It was
had
such
like a picture of
little
a fish on the thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was such a fun spot. They did plays there, and what was kind of funny about Jazz Freddy too is we had to use whatever set was up for whatever play was being done. So we did shows. One time they were doing Anna Christie, the Eugene O'Neill play. So we had ropes and sails on the set.
That's great. Did you use them and incorporate them in your improv?
We did sometimes, but a lot of times we just kind of would be like hoping the audience would pretend it was just a blank slate.
Yeah.
And then there was another guy doing a Judy Garland show, so it was all sparkly and sequins. But we had to just do our show in what it felt a little like that show they do now, Stolen House.
I've heard of that. It sounds incredible. Yeah, that's Bob and Stephanie, right? Or they
and Pasquazi and those guys in Adsit, and that sounds so fun. We did it by necessity, but I love the idea of doing it voluntarily.
Right. I love you guys trying to do a scene, like a very serious doctor's office scene, but there's sails behind you and like picture like those cutout waves from like old like Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney shows, like wooden waves in front of you.
That was kind of how it felt a lot of the time, but it was such a fun environment, and the community was so supportive. Like so many of our friends came out from IO, and the guys from the family, like Ian Roberts and Adam McKay, and those guys came out to see us, and there was so much peer support from all our friends that coming out, and that meant the world to us. And when I found out, like I remember being at a barbecue at Susan Messing's backyard, and Stephen Colbert, who I didn't really know very well at the time, I was a huge fan and admirer, but he came over and he said how much he liked our show, and I was like, oh my God, he came to see our show, and that meant the world when someone you admired so much was, because it was it was so hard to get any attention for those shows, and back then to do anything, and Jack Helbig, the critic, was hugely helpful too by coming out, because a lot of press would ignore improv shows, and he came out and gave us a really nice piece in the Reader that helped incredibly to get people to come out and see us, and I'll always be grateful to him.
Yeah, that's hugely helpful, especially in a town like Chicago, where people want to see theater, but there's like such an abundance of it. It's hard for them to find new things, or especially little niche things like that at the time. What kind of audiences were you getting?
We actually got a wonderful following for Jazz Freddy. After the first, we didn't really. The weird thing was when it started, it wasn't even necessarily supposed to be a show. We were doing workshops to just push ourselves and try new things and branch out and kind of get out of our comfort zone. And then when early on, most of the audiences were fellow improvisers coming out to support us. And then we eventually got, largely because of Jack Helbig's review and everything, we were getting a lot of just regular people that like to see Chicago theater. And that was just a wonderful thing to see, just people coming out. And we usually, even though Live Bait wasn't a large house, we usually had full houses for that run. And that was really, that was so new for us, you know. When I started at Improv Olympic, for example, it was such a gypsy organization. We would move around from bar to bar. And, you know, one time we showed up at one place and it was padlocked because the place hadn't paid their taxes. You know, so that was what we were more used to, is just being kind of gypsies. And so to have a real theater to play in was such a gift, you know, for all of us. And then several of us got hired. If it weren't for Jazz Freddy, I don't think I would have ever worked at Second City, because I'm incredibly grateful for that, because they came out to see us. The Second City people came out to see us, and I didn't know they were in the audience. And I'm so grateful I didn't know, because my Second City auditions, I was always so in my head for them and so self-conscious because I wanted it so bad. My biggest dream was to work at Second City. That was the top of the mountain for me. I never looked beyond that, really. And so my auditions, I never gave myself that crucial freedom to fail that you need to do a good audition. So, and it was especially hard when some people had vouched for me going in, like probably people like Mick and them. You would say, "Hey, you know, take a look at Brian. He's coming in," and I would just invalidate their opinion, you know, because my brain would just completely freeze. Yeah. So when they came out to see Jazz Freddy, I'm so grateful I didn't know they were there, because I was just having a blast, you know, and I was just loose and relaxed and you know, just having fun. So they hired me and Pat Finn and Rachel Dratch and Miriam, my wife Miriam, and Pete later worked there, and Dave Keckner and Kevin Dorff, and a bunch of us ended up working at Second City, and Pete was the director there for one of our ETC shows. And so a bunch of us, and Jimmy Crane, you know, was in that group, and just a wonderful mix of people. And I'll always be so grateful for that experience.
Yeah, no kidding. When you say that you guys were trying new things, describe that.
Well, some of the things was just that it was a lot more patient scene work, a lot slower scene work. We also started using the tags and the sweep edits and things like that.
And those were new at the time?
I think it's weird. It's all kind of a blur in some ways as to what came first, but there were definitely some new things. And the scene work was definitely a lot more patient. There were time dashes too, like what we usually did was 2 back, 1 forward, which means the first scene, there'd be maybe a 2-person scene, and someone would come in and tag one of the people out and take that other person back in time. It could be an hour before, or it could be 10 years before. And then the next edit would also take back in time. And then the third one was going forward in time. So it sounds more complicated than it was, but it was really fun because you got to see. So if you saw a father and son scene, someone might take you back to how the father had been raised, you know, and what his relationship with his own father was like. And then it was just incredibly playful. And also the connections that would get formed that way were so often so fun, and you wouldn't see them coming. Like I remember once, there was a scene where 2 old men had been playing chess in a park, and there was another scene where there was taking place in a medieval castle, and it kind of started to dawn on us that the castle was on the chessboard.
Oh, that's great.
And but it was one of those things that none of us would have thought of. Again, it was one of those moments that I always look back on with such fondness, because it was an organic discovery that, oh, there's this checkered landscape outside the castle. And
that's great.
And it was one of those things that I don't think any of us individually would have initiated, but it just dawned on us that was what is happening. And those are those moments that, as you know, that are so addictive. And that's what you always hope to have.
Yeah, magical for you and for the audience. I love that you used the phrase, it started to dawn on us.
Yeah.
You know, you're really beholden to where the show is organically taking all of you. There is no leader. There's no like someone coming in and bludgeoning everyone else with their idea. It dawned on all of you collectively. It's so beautiful.
Oh, thanks. That is really how it felt. And I know oftentimes it feels corny to talk about things in those terms, but that's sincerely how it felt. You know?
Yeah. I mean, if you're ever going to talk about things that way in improv, this is the place to do it. This is a safe space to get corny. I want to use this opportunity to ask a listener a question. Our subscribers can submit questions to guests directly. And Drew says Jazz Freddy is still considered a legendary team and show. I've heard Craig Kikowski describe what it was like from the point of view of an enthusiastic viewer. But what was the show like to be in? Are there things you learned or used with that group that you still use in your improv today?
That's a great question. Thanks, Drew. First of all, it means so much that Craig thought so much of that show because I have the highest respect for Craig, and he's one of my favorite improvisers and people. So the fact that we did some work that he found inspiring in any way means a lot. But yeah, I think one thing I took from it was that sense of patient ensemble and just discovering things and not like forcing things. And it can be such a beautiful thing to just let things play out and not feel like you have to force comedic moments, let them come to you a little more, trust that your scene partners will take care of you, and that if you're just out there as an ensemble, just making the scene the key thing and not your individual performance the key thing, you all end up that old saying that it reinforced that old idea that Del always talked about, making your scene partners look good and you look good as a result of that. And people have heard that a million times, but that experience really reinforced that for me. And just to, if you're with the right people, and group chemistry is a very, it can be a very mysterious thing, like why some groups gel and some don't. And that group, it was just a reminder to me that was one of those groups that just felt very cohesive, and we complemented each other in our style. So I noticed that carried through later when I would see writing staffs, at places like Conan or Colbert, where the best staff seem to have complementary styles, like where everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And like that was very true at Jazz Freddy and on all writing staffs I've been on, where, like, for example, when I would be on improv teams, I tended to sit in chairs, and when I moved around, I rarely bent my knees or did anything physical. And there would be other people like friends of ours from IO, like Pete Holney, who could do the best object work in the world. Object work was never one of my strengths, but I had such reverence for it when I would see it done well. So that mixture of styles, I think I learned how important it is to have people bringing different kinds of strengths to the work and complementing each other's style. Like I remember with object work, it was so funny. I remember once at Second City, I made a really conscious effort to just really pay attention to object work one night. I was just going to make it a goal. And in a set, I lifted up this, what it was supposed to be a jukebox. And I lifted it up and I was like, I'm going to feel the weight of this thing. And I'm going to be like what TJ does and just you're going to see the jukebox and I'm just going to lift it up and
you're going to know what song is playing on that jukebox by the time I lift it.
Exactly. It was the Gene Vincent Bebop-a-lula. But then at intermission, I was like so proud of myself that I lifted it and felt the weight of it. And then at intermission, Neil Flynn said, you walked right through it after you lifted it up. And I was like, I did. And he's like, I was so... He said it was such affection, but it was like, he could tell I was really proud of it.
You're in the hospital the next day with a hernia because you believed it so hard that you tore something. And
I really did, and I'm very injury prone, so I wouldn't be surprised if pantomime object work could put me in the hospital. But
That's so funny. Talk to me about some of the, if we think of it like a group of Avengers, like what different people's superpowers were. Like what do you think your strength or your talent was on that team, and what were some other people's?
Oh, that's a great question. I think first of all, we had some really. I think for me, I think one thing I always felt kind of suited for is I love doing characters. So I rarely sounded like myself in shows. In fact, until I got to Second City and was encouraged to do more like just playing more like myself, that was a real struggle for me because I always tend to hide behind characters. It's one of the reasons I never did stand up. So I love doing characters. I love justifying things that seem like non sequiturs. I think that's always been my favorite thing is when something gets tossed in that's almost seems like a mistake, trying to find a way to justify it into the reality of the scene. That's one of the reasons I always love those short form games when you would have to incorporate what seemed like a non sequitur. That was, I think, the most addictive thing for me early on in improv was justifying seeming non sequiturs or mistakes.
Yeah, that classic short form game, Blind Line, is like that, where you get phrases from the audience and put them on pieces of paper, and then you call in the actors who were out of the room and don't know what sentences are on the papers, and they have to pull one, in the middle of their scene. They have to say whatever's on it, and then make it work in the scene. When you say like you were justifying, like, are you talking about like someone else would say something random in a scene and you loved coming up with a justification, or would you lob yourself some for fun, like just say something kind of off the wall?
What I always enjoyed is when someone else would say something or something was maybe came out a little like not it was expected to be, and then like having to justify something else that happened. Like one of my favorite examples, this was not my justification, but one of my favorite examples of that was at an ASCAT once at UCB, when someone meant to say shot put and they said put shot. And John Lutz ended up as a guy competing in the put shot competition, which is a guy, he has to run around and try to find a place to put the ball. So, and it was such a wonderful, it was one of my favorite examples of that, of the thing I was always most addicted to. And I think Amy Poehler was like narrating the Olympic event, the put shot. And she's saying, there he is. He's trying to find a place to put the shot. I don't know if he's going to find a place. And John looked so serious about it. Like he was running around. And I think those moments, I think those are one of the things I love. And this goes true for my later days in late night too. When stuff would go wrong in sketches, those were often my favorite moments. Like when, I would slip on the stairs a little bit. And I remember I was coming downstairs once at Conan and I slipped a little. I was wearing sandals and I was dressed as God. And Conan said, like, God, have you been drinking? And it ended up turning into this really like a silly conversation about what God was drinking and that he hates himself or whatever. And it was, those are a lot of times, I think because Conan and Stephen are improvisers, they love when things go off the rails. And if you, as you know, when you treat mistakes as gifts, the audience loves it,
It's a gift for the audience in the show. It's an open door for a new universe. It's permission to be silly because it's nobody came in with my silly idea about put shot that I'm telling you that I came up with this idea. The accident gives you permission to joyfully romp around in the put shot world in a way that makes it fun for everybody and not like ego driven or like, well, what was that dumb joke that person made on purpose? You know what I mean?
I think you're absolutely right. And I got a little off your question. I'm sorry. In terms of the other styles of the people at Jazz Freddy, like that was a lot of the things I like to do. But we had some really wonderful actors in the group too. Like Chris Reed was a wonderful actor. Rachel could really act really well. And then we had people that were very comfortable playing the straight parts. Like Stephanie Howard was very funny, but she grounded everything, in a very real way. Pat Finn was very funny with physical stuff. The way his old buddy Farley was, like they went to college together and I think they got a lot of the same bits, off each other. Like one of the bits that always cracked me up was that Chris used to do, and I don't know if he actually got it from Pat when they were in college, but if an attractive woman was walking by in Madison, Chris would sometimes drop down and start doing push-ups, go 198, 199. He would start at 198. And it was just, it made me laugh every time, even though I knew, even when it wasn't a surprise. Like I'd seen the bit like 10 times and he was so committed to it. But Pat brought that kind of physicality to the group. And Keckner's a wonderful actor. And Dorff, as you know, Kevin Dorff is one of the most pure improvisers you'll ever see. And he'll ground everything in complete reality. But he's also unbelievably smart and well-read, and his reference level is insane. So he could, he's just one of the best, pure improvisers around. The way Adsit is, where he'll, or my original improv hero, when I was taking that beginning improv class, Dave Pasquesi was the guy I latched onto first, where, oh wow, that guy's really, really smart and playful at the same time. And he was the guy I wanted to be most like when I first saw him, long before I ever met him. He was a guy I kind of zoned in on that first summer.
Smart and playful is a great way to describe him. And also like grounded and small in a way that's like his smallness is epic. It's like a large smallness, if that's possible, right?
That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah.
Like there's like an electricity to the tiniest little facial wiggles or silences, or like you can feel his pensiveness. It's so, I don't know how to describe the way he plays.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Just, and that, he sat in with us with Jazz Freddy once, and we were all like, I remember Noah even saying, the late great Noah Gregoropoulos, who was my roommate for a while, he was in Jazz Freddy with us too, and he's just so smart, and I miss him, all the time. He was such a great force and such a honest, smart improviser. But Noah even said that Dave intimidated him. That's how Dave was. Like, and when Noah didn't really get intimidated, but Dave was one of those guys, everybody wanted to be good around Dave, Yeah. And he'd be like, oh, shut up. Just, he would dismiss that. But it's true. We all wanted to shine if Dave was there.
Here's a question that just occurred to me, and then I want to get back to character stuff in a second. But what a talent pool at that time, and what a talent pool that holds up. It's not just like you guys were kids and you didn't know better about what talent was. It's like truly some of the greatest actors and improvisers of many generations. What did that come from? What were people doing to get better, or were they all innately talented? Were people like doing 2 or 3 rehearsals a week? Were you like, what created that caliber of work, do you think?
That's such a great question, Suzi. I think part of the thing was at the time, as you know, like there weren't big scenes in like LA and New York at the time. So all the people who were really committed to trying this work moved to Chicago. So I think that was part of it, was that just that was the place to go at the time. So you just it's kind of crazy though, looking back at the people that I just got to see as local entertainment back then, like just seeing, Farley and Bob Odenkirk and, Amy Poehler and Tina Fey and Steve Carell. I mean, the first time I saw Colbert, I'd gone to see Chris Farley's first touring company show, and it was Stephen, Paul Dinello, who works with us now at Colbert, and Jenna Jolovitz, who was on my Improv Olympic team later, and just Rose Abdu and all these unbelievable people, Ian Gomez and all these people. That was the touring company. It was unbelievable. And then you'd see people like, even the understudies for Main Stage would be like Jane Lynch. It would just be like, she's like understudying, like, and it was crazy. And then Mike Myers was there for at least one summer. He even did Improv Olympic a little bit. I didn't really know him at all. But
Sharna loves that. She, of course, yeah. You would think from the back of her book that he like co-founded it. She loves like advertising that Mike Myers was part of Improv Olympic. But yeah, that's so funny.
I remember seeing him in one Herald show when I went back to town just to visit. I was still going to grad school, and I went by to see Pat and Farley. They were supposed to go up and do a Herald, and Mike Myers was in one of the Heralds that night. So I always thought that was kind of cool, that even though he was already in Second City, that he just loved to improvise. And I don't know what don't know him personally or anything, but it was crazy, just the number of people. And then the people who are just working in the industry to this day. Like I got to tour with Suzi Nakamura, who's just wonderful, and Renee Albert and Todd Stashwick and all these people, and Finner and John Glazer, who I worked with later at Conan for many years. And John and I got hired at Second City the exact same day, and I didn't know him. I recognized him from around town, but I remember sitting on the bench in the lobby at Second City and going, oh, that's that guy I've seen around town. And it's just so funny that we ended up working at Conan all those years later. And I just had brunch with him a few weeks ago, and it's so weird. We have kids now that are like college age. It's very, very strange. But time, I remember that so clearly, just sitting on the bench and seeing John there.
I feel like across the globe right now, improv super fans are all running to their notebook and updating their time machine priorities. They're like, okay, wait, I got to redraft this. I'll kill Hitler later. First, I want to go back to Chicago at that era and just watch some shows.
It was really crazy, and I realized how spoiled we were. Like I remember going up to Steve Carell in a dark 7-Eleven parking lot. I didn't know him at the time. I hadn't been hired at Second City myself yet, never expected to be. But I was such a fan, and I saw him with his bicycle in a 7-Eleven on Racine at Belmont, and I just went, oh, yeah, hi, I just want to say you're really awesome. And I just totally, just a fanboy. And he couldn't have been nicer, and he still is, But that was how it was. Like there was just, the local people were just incredible and so inspiring to watch. And to watch Amy Sedaris and Carell and Colbert just as like they were just nobody had any money, but everybody was just like so in awe of those people. It was just incredible.
A special time. This one's also from Drew. He says, this is kind of a long one, but it's worth the long walk. He says, sure. I'm really curious about how you approach scenes. From the shows I've seen, character game seems to come so naturally to you. I've heard you say a super clear sentence at the top of an organic scene. He says, a real but likely misremembered example is, sure, I may be your grandpa, but I'm also a Satanist. And then every sentence out of your mouth after that hits on both of those elements. And then the example is, who wants a Werther's Original dipped in goat's blood? Convoluted question, but what are you actually thinking about during a scene? What is your approach?
That's another great question, Drew. I think my favorite thing to do is to come in and heighten a scene that's already been established or started going. Like my comfort zone is coming in and heightening what's already happening, or once the game is kind of going, like to kind of go in and play with the game that's going. I'm fine with being the first scene and starting it off, but my favorite thing is kind of just seeing what's going on, seeing some way to kind of help or heighten what's happening with a walk on or if it's called for or that kind of thing. But if I'm really honest with myself, I'm not usually the first person out there. In shows. And I admire people who are, that just jump into the pool. But I tend to hang back. And that's why I've rarely done shows where it's just 2-person improv or something like Weird Ass. Like when Bob and Steph do that show, I just have the highest respect for people that do those kind of shows. I do Gravid Water where it's 2 people, but you're playing off an actor who's memorized lines. Yeah. So that's different. So you're not initiating, they're initiating with a written line, So you appreciate having a little bit of backline time to kind of digest what's going on and come up with a way to support and heighten. It's almost like the writer in you that's like, okay, what do I do with this and how do I make it better? Is that kind of what's going on? I think so, Suzi. I think that is sort of what my thought process is. And I've always like I said, really admired the people that jump out there right away. Like when we used to do the Armando show, I was in like the first people to do Armando in 95. And even then I was like, that's basically the same format as Ass Cat used later. And I was always so grateful when a couple people jumped out first, because I'm like, oh, I'll kind of get to see what's going on and play with it and heighten it and support what's happening and come in maybe with a new angle on it. Yeah. Like when we did Lois Kaz, which is another long form show at Second City, that was all the people that were working at Second City doing a new long-form show that Noah Gregoropoulos has directed. And that was after Jazz Freddy, but it was the first long-form show at Second City that I think was ever done. And I remember it was so great because there were so many people like Scott Adsit was doing that show, or Teresa Mulligan and people like that who would happily jump in for that first scene. And I was always so grateful that there were some people confident and comfortable enough to do that. I'm definitely more the jump in later kind of guy.
For our listeners who are maybe newer to the art form, do you have any concrete examples of either things that really happened or just kind of styles of jumping in and heightening what's there? Like, I remember when we were learning at IO, I think Bob Dassey taught us about frustrating the want. So, like, a character wants something, and a great way to comedically heighten that is to frustrate them more, like find more and more heightened ways that they're not getting what they want. I think the example that they used at the time was like someone was like trying to return a video or a library book really quickly, and the store clerk started like talking about more and more things, and then someone from the back line came on and made the motion like that guy's stomach was growling. So it's like we know that he's also like super hungry. So like things like that. Like, do you have like examples of other ways that people can help from the back line in a heightening way?
Those are great examples. I remember just as an example of hanging back and then seeing something that might be called for. I remember from one Lois Kaz show, I remember Keckner was out there with another actor, and he was talking, they were looking out on a cliffside, and he was saying, the sea is angry. Somebody took something from that sea, and the sea wants it back. And I just decided to come as Poseidon, and I was an enraged Poseidon saying that, my children of the fish had been harvested by the fishermen. And then Adam McKay ended up calling me in at a fast food restaurant saying, Poseidon, can you come in here, please? He says, we sell fish that people really like here, and you're like driving off all our customers. And I was like, you lay my child out on a fresh, crisp tortilla, and it was just, but it was all listening to the sea is angry. How would that manifest itself? Maybe Poseidon comes in and he's furious at these people for fishing. And so that was just kind of a weird example. But I think the example you used of just heightening what's happening, there was another scene in that same show where I think Adam was flirting with Rachel Dratch, who was the ice cream scooper, in a store. And he just kept doing really boring small talk with her. And everyone is behind in line, just waiting to get their ice cream. And I remember Kevin Dorff said, my child is dying. I have to get him some ice cream.
There you go.
And it was just listening for what's called for and heightening the game. And that was before, like, I love the term game, and I think it's a nice, clear way to teach it. But I don't remember hearing that term back in Chicago, even though it was sort of like everyone was sort of aware that you do heighten the pattern of whatever's happening. But I think the term game turned out to be a very helpful game for training,
Yeah, I feel like that came when the UCB4 tried to reverse engineer what they were doing to start their training center and their curriculum. It was like they needed these like chapter titles, the game of the scene, Game is just essentially what you find funny or what's fun to play in the scene, and then cementing that dynamic as kind of the law of that universe. It's like if one guy is the Charlie Brown who's having the worst day in the world, then everybody else is going to be heightening that bad day. And it's not that he's suddenly going to get promoted. If he does get promoted, it's going to be a fake out. You've been promoted to head shit eater, You're going to eat all this manure and the city will love you. Yeah. The example of the kid in line for ice cream is like one way of heightening is like, how do you raise the stakes? How do you make it more urgent or more dire or more sad that this kid this is like a Make-A-Wish kid and this flirtation is eclipsing his need. If we were to reverse engineer your Poseidon thing, maybe we would say that's an example of like like blowing out the world or like a ripple effect. So, okay, if the sea has had things taken from it, how does that affect, the things in the sea? Of course, Poseidon can be a character. If he's mad about the fish being taken, then brilliant that McKay is like, well, then that affects my business at Long John Silver's or whatever. It's amazing how many different ways there are to heighten something that's at hand or to support it from the back line.
Absolutely. And one of the cool things about Lois Kaz that Noah brought in as an innovation that I thought that I remember carrying over a bit to New York and ASCAT is when you're not necessarily an actor in the scene, adding to the environment of the scene. Like when I came in as Poseidon, a bunch of actors came in and started doing splashes of water coming off of me. Mm-hmm. So they weren't in the scene as performers who were with dialogue, but they were doing like fish and water splashing off me. So it made it so much more of a godlike figure, and like kind of a mythological look to the whole scene. So if I was just standing there holding a pantomime trident, that would have probably been okay, but they just adding them all like splashing and making the sound effects and all that stuff. I think that ended up becoming something I remember carrying over to a lot of later forms that I saw. And so I give Noah a lot of credit for playing with that, like having the actors be environment out there.
But by the time I came up through Chicago, that was like a core tenet of IO. That was like really in the DNA of what was happening in the shows and in our classes. It was really like, and I'm grateful for it. I feel like that's one element that to me is a hallmark of kind of the Chicago style that when it's lacking or missing, the shows feel so much more naked. A criticism of kind of the UCB style, like the Epidemic for a while was just like two people standing and talking is very like writerly. It's like, okay, the conversation is witty and they played the game, but there was nothing theatrical about it, and that sense of like group play and group improvisation was kind of missing. It's better now. I think that was like a, kind of a temporary growing pain of that style. But I would say to the listeners, adding on support like that like the waves crashing around Poseidon's feet and the sound of seagulls and a lightning crash or whatever you want to add is one of the easiest ways to make a show not just good but incredible and to wow an audience. You don't have to be clever to do that. You don't have to even really know what the game is. Like a lot of people are self-conscious about like, well, my brain doesn't work like that and I don't always know what they want. But if Poseidon comes in, okay, great. You can be the crashing waves. You're supporting that move and you're filling it out and making it three-dimensional for the audience. And it's stuff like that the audience is wowed by because they've never seen a group of adults just agree on something that quickly and create like a moving train right before their very eyes or whatever, a rainstorm. And it feels like magic to the audience.
Absolutely. I've always found it magical to see it myself. And then sometimes when you're on stage, you don't see the full stage picture like that. And I happened to see this one because Noah had a VHS tape of that particular Lois Kaz show. And I got to see what everyone was doing around me by seeing the tape. Because on stage, like a lot of times these shows just they're gone, it's so ephemeral and you never see it. But I remember going, oh, wow, look what Teresa's doing a splash off of me. And look what Kevin's doing over there. And like it, and all these things I couldn't see while I was in the scene. And I was like, wow, that's stuff that if I was in the audience, I think I would really appreciate,
Do any of those tapes still exist? Like tapes from your old shows?
I wonder, I had a box of some old tapes. I hope I have that one. That's the only Lois Kaz I had on tape, and Noah just happened to have a tape of that one. It's funny because like so many of the shows I wish we had, like I know nowadays it's much more common. Like if I do shows at UCB, I only get down there about once a month at best, but they tape everything and it's like with full cameras and for the webcam and everything. And I think that's such a wonderful thing to have as a resource.
Yeah.
But so many of my favorite shows are just like these flashes of memories that I remember moments, and I usually remember other people's moments. I don't remember my own. I'm sure you're the same way, where people will come up to you and, like that line Drew just mentioned that he heard from me. I don't remember that at all, but I remember little things Neil Flynn said, or Dorf, or Rachel, or Miriam, or over the years, or like that put shot. I remember other people's moments.
You said you're more comfortable hiding behind a character than playing by yourself, playing as yourself, or at least you were when you headed into Second City. How did you access your characters? Was it changing your voice, some people say like adjust your spine or take on a different gestural or postural position? What was your inroad? Was it point of view, emotion, physical?
It was usually, because I'm not a super physical performer, it usually tended to be more vocal and like attitudinal changes. Like if I was playing sort of a biker type character, talk like, it would just be more, my physicality wouldn't really change much because I'm just not a physical performer. But I remember Martin DeMott, one of my old Second City teachers, who was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. He got us to do a wonderful exercise that I always, if I ever did more teaching at any point, I would want to bring this exercise back, because he had everyone embody kind of an animal energy. So and I remember, so someone was a shopkeeper and she was supposed to be bird-like. And then a guy who's kind of ape-like was supposed to come in. And it's amazing how much it can add to your character, because you're not like waving your arms like an actual gorilla, but you're much more like full of testosterone, and you walk into a room with great confidence like a silverback gorilla would, and the bird person would be very timid behind the cash register. And I remember thinking that was having an animal, like a spirit animal almost in mind for your character, is incredibly helpful for physicality and things like that. And I always wish I could have relearned that lesson. I forgot it usually, but in terms of my own characters, it usually started with the voice, and that went on to Conan. Like, I think if you turn the volume down on a lot of my characters, all you would see was the silly costume, and you wouldn't hear the voice, so you wouldn't really. The physicality really didn't change much.
Right. Yeah, it depends on the Scottish accent or the grizzled God voice or Let's talk about your Conan characters. For part 2 of this episode, go to yesalso.supercast.com. If you like this podcast and you want double the content, head over to yesalso.supercast.com and subscribe. You can also help us out for free by subscribing to us on YouTube and talking us up to your improv communities. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in one of our Q&A episodes, or a topic that you think would make a great bonus episode, put it in a 5-star review. If you're a theater who would like to host us for a live recording and improv show, let us know at yesalsopod@gmail.com. A very special thanks to our producer, Ryan Rosenberg, audio and video editor, Brian Kessler, and social media czar, Britt Faye. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. No, we won't, Suzi. That's not how podcasts work. They won't even see us. They will listen to us, so it's actually the opposite of both things you said. Thanks for listening, and you will listen to us next week. Maybe. We don't know.